The Richest Man in Babylon by George Samuel CLASON. The Richest Man in Babylon is a collection of loosely connected parables that outline the basic principles of financial planning. They were originally published in the 1920s as a series of pamphlets that were distributed to readers through banks and other financial institutions. CLASON's stories, set in ancient Babylon, all share a similar plot. A wise rich man teaches an ignorant poor man how to work hard, implement a budget, save, and invest wisely. The first tale, The Richest Man in Babylon, is about Arcad, the wealthy man to whom the title refers. One day Arcad is approached by two friends, Bonsir and Kobi, who wish to know the secrets behind Arcad's success. Arcad obliges, explaining that, as a young man, he was mentored by a wise lender called Algamish. Algamish taught Arcad how to save and invest. Algamish's most important piece of advice was to save 10% of all income. Through trial, error, and Algamish's guidance, Arcad learned how to invest wisely by entrusting his money only to experts. He internalized Algamish's teachings so thoroughly that he eventually helped manage his mentor's estate. The next few parables are also about Arcad. In one, he delivers a lecture about the myth of luck and the importance of hard work. In another, Arcad is summoned by the king of Babylon to instruct the ignorant masses in financial affairs. Seemingly everyone in the kingdom is poor. In a series of daily seminars, Arcad presents 7 principles that will help his students overcome their money problems. The first is to save 10% of all income. The second is to implement a budget for daily expenses. Another is to invest so that saved monies multiply. Arcad also advises his students to protect their savings and investments by entrusting their care to experts, to become homeowners, to save for retirement, and to constantly work to increase their earning power. The 5 Laws of Gold follows a different character from a later time, Kalabab. Kalabab relays a story he once heard from Nomasir, who was the son of Arcad. Nomasir lost, then earned back a small fortune by following his father's invaluable advice. The advice included 5 laws, which were to save 10% of income, invest, handle money with great caution, hire experts, and avoid tricksters. In The Gold Lender of Babylon, a spearmaker, who has slowly amassed savings over many years, consults with the lender regarding whether or not he should make a risky loan to his brother-in-law. Mathan, the lender, offers advice about loaning money, including how to evaluate a potential borrower. The potential lender must consider if borrowers are likely to repay the loan, if their venture will be successful, and if they're willing to put up collateral. A parable about the fortitude of the walls of Babylon illustrates how good planning can help people weather a crisis. Another parable focuses on Dabasir, a camel trader, and Tarkad, a hungry man who is in debt. Over a meal with Tarkad, Dabasir shares his life story, which includes falling into debt, being sold into slavery, escaping his masters, and returning to Babylon to slowly repay his creditors. A final story shares the perspective of a former slave, Sharu Nada, who reminisces about his friendship with a fellow slave named Arad Guru. Both men were hard workers. Eventually, Arad saved enough money to buy both men's freedom, and they went into business together. Arad died, but Sharu Nada lived to share their inspirational story with Arad's grandson, who sorely needed financial advice. Key insights. 1. Everyone should save 10% of their income. 2. Investing is a key financial strategy. 3. Financial advisors are useful guides. 4. Budgets are a critical financial planning tool. 5. Homeownership is a particularly good investment. 6. Hard work is the cornerstone of financial success. 7. It's deeply satisfying to accumulate wealth from hard work and careful money management. 8. Luck is never the source of a great fortune. 9. It's important to pay back debts. Analysis. Key insight 1. Everyone should save 10% of their income. CLASON perhaps coined the phrase, pay yourself first, a surprisingly modern-sounding piece of advice that is offered throughout The Richest Man in Babylon. The platitude means that it's important to save money, even while paying down debt and other bills. CLASON recommends a minimum savings of 10% of income, which is in alignment with modern experts' advice. Accessibility and practicality seem to be foremost in his mind when he chose 10% as a savings goal, as the text emphasizes how the amount makes no discernible impact on the saver's lifestyle. Today, with the convenience of modern banking, there are a number of ways to automate savings so that they occur almost beneath notice. Most banks offer the ability to deposit 10% or more of a given paycheck directly into a savings account, so that the saver doesn't have to make a conscious decision to transfer money to savings. Some banks offer programs like Bank of America's Keep the Change Savings, which rounds debit card transactions up to the next dollar. For example, the purchase of a book that costs $14.82 would be rounded up to $15, with 18 cents deposited into a savings account. While the amount may seem small for a single transaction, over time the savings grows. With both direct deposit and programs like Keep the Change, the key is that the decision to save money is automatically triggered and executed. Saving works best when it's on autopilot because there is less opportunity for resistance. The saver is free to focus on the rewarding part, which is watching savings grow. Key Insight 2. Investing is a key financial strategy. Money must not be merely saved, it must be invested. Investments generate income, whereas monies that sit untouched are a wasted opportunity. Another important reason to invest is that static savings tend to depreciate over time. This depreciation is due to the economic phenomenon of inflation, which is when prices for goods and services increase. Effectively, the value of a unit of money, like a dollar, will lessen over time, so inflation can decimate the savings of people who are retired and living on a fixed income. Inflation is usually expressed as an annual percentage. Even at an inflation rate of just around 2% a year, which is what the rate has been in recent U.S. history, $100 saved in 2018 would only have the spending power of $60 by 2038. Different people have different investments in their financial portfolios, but even a low-risk investment should aim for a return that's higher than 2%. People with less wealth tend to prefer low-risk investments, while the wealthy have more latitude to branch out into more volatile investments that carry more risk, but offer more reward. For instance, an affluent individual might invest in a new restaurant, where the risk of failure is high, but the possibility of success is quite lucrative. Investments always introduce some amount of financial risk. Low-risk investments bring low returns. For example, Treasury inflation-protected securities are specifically designed to protect against inflation by offering low yields. The stock market is much more volatile, but it can yield higher returns. Key Insight 3. Financial advisors are useful guides. The Richest Man in Babylon is filled with fictional characters who are de facto financial planners, rich, self-made men. These men carry strong endorsements from leaders like the king, or from their communities at large. Uniformly, their teachings are wise and effective, suggesting that their modern-day analogs, bankers and financial planners, are trustworthy experts who should be consulted in all matters of money. In the modern world, there is still a certain amount of trepidation surrounding the decision to hire a financial planner, whether it's because people crave privacy or because they fear the cost will be prohibitive. But much as a surgeon is the best equipped person to remove a tumor, a financial planner is an essential expert who can get rid of financial waste and spur savings. Regardless of financial status, it's important for everyone to have an expert source of advice. Good financial health is not just practical and wise, it is also critical to people's overall sense of well-being, according to researchers. At the New York Times, Ron Lieber reports a potential large-scale change in the financial planning industry. In the not-so-distant past, financial planners were largely available to only a very wealthy clientele that paid large commissions. Now there are financial planners that serve small-scale investors, charging a flat, recurring fee for service. Key Insight 4. Budgets are a critical financial planning tool. Budgets can help people identify unnecessary spending to cut and other opportunities to better manage finances. In the United States, less than half of people use a budget, which is unfortunate because they're quite easy to create. The fundamental rule of budgeting is to divide all expenses into two simple categories: wants and needs. Wants are considered discretionary spending, whereas needs are considered fixed expenses. Individuals should aim only to dedicate about 50% of their income to fixed expenses like mortgage payments or insurance premiums. The remainder can be dedicated to discretionary spending and savings. In creating a budget, it's important to consider not just daily or monthly expenses, but also less frequent expenses like car repairs, taxes, and holiday gifts. Annual expenses should be amortized over the course of the year if at all possible. Savers can also establish an emergency fund for unforeseen expenses such as illness. Key Insight 5. Homeownership is a particularly good investment. One of the tales in The Richest Man in Babylon emphasizes the importance of homeownership as an investment strategy. Historically, in the U.S., owning a house has been an effective way to build wealth. Researchers at Harvard University found that collectively, people who buy houses accumulate more wealth because their saving habits are reinforced by financial obligations like a down payment and regular mortgage payments. A 2013 survey administered by the Federal Reserve estimates that the difference in savings and other assets of renters versus owners is nearly $200,000. After the financial crisis in 2008, the housing bust caused the proportion of renters to rise. Homeownership was more difficult to finance, but it was also considered riskier. Still, the New York Times editorial board identified homeownership as the best means of building wealth in 2014. Another reason that the rate of homeowners has dropped is the student debt loads carried by millennials. In the U.S., student debt doubled between 2008 and 2017, partly due to the rise in the cost of a college education. This phenomenon will likely impact not just the personal wealth of millennials who don't buy homes, but also the economy at large, since homeowners tend to spend more on furniture and other household goods than renters do. Key Insight 6. Hard work is the cornerstone of financial success. The economy of The Richest Man in Babylon is a strict meritocracy. People who are rich are hardworking and wise. Poor people are foolish and ignorant, though their fortunes always improve when they accept that hard work is a necessary part of life. Across the board, hard work drives financial success, and a lack of hard work drives financial failure. Everyone has the potential to be rich and successful, regardless of socioeconomic advantage. Characters who are slaves pull themselves out of oppression, and rich people squander their wealth and fall into squalor. The book's notion of the economy as a meritocracy was very much in line with mainstream ideas about the American dream at the time of its publication. Similar values are espoused in literary works that were published around the same time, such as Horatio Alger's Rags to Riches narratives. Key Insight 7. It's deeply satisfying to accumulate wealth from hard work and careful money management. Saving money is psychologically soothing and emotionally satisfying, particularly when it's hard-won. Research suggests that a key ingredient to happiness is the application of hard work. Humans are inherently motivated by challenges, and hard work that's engaging can engender more satisfaction than a relatively passive activity. Financial experts recommend paying down debt and saving money at the same time, rather than repaying all debt first. One reason is practical. The sooner one starts to save, the easier it is to accumulate wealth via investments like 401k funds. The other reason is more of a quality of life issue. Research suggests that paying down debt isn't as emotionally gratifying as saving money. Key Insight 8. Luck is never the source of a great fortune. In The Richest Man in Babylon, there is no such thing as good luck, at least as the source of continued fortune. More often, money that is gained quickly is also lost quickly. This phenomenon is infamous among lottery winners in the modern world, who often experience a shift in attitude called sudden wealth syndrome. Named by psychologist Stephen Goldbart, sudden wealth syndrome can cause feelings of guilt and isolation, and behaviors like outrageous spending and bad decision-making. Another population that experiences sudden wealth syndrome is inheritors. According to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, for some 70% of wealthy people, the second generation will squander the family fortune. The third generation is even worse, with 90% of wealthy families having lost their riches by that point. One reason for the abysmal sustainability rate is that the second and third generations are ill-prepared to handle great wealth. Often these inheritors have no experience managing wealth. In many cases, they weren't even aware their families had a great deal of money until after the death of their parents. Other issues, like poor communication among surviving family members and the inheritors' refusal to generate new income streams, exacerbate the problem. Careful planning and wise choices are needed not just to amass wealth, but to sustain it. Key Insight 9. It's important to pay back debts. Dabasir, a character in The Richest Man of Babylon, proselytizes about the importance of paying back debts. After he fell into debt, he fled Babylon and was sold into slavery. Eventually, Dabasir escaped and returned to Babylon to repay the debts, recognizing that he was a fool to run from them in the first place. Dabasir endured the wrath of his community, including consequences like banishment and slavery that aren't applicable in the modern Western world. However, ignoring debts can have severe consequences for the modern borrower. Bad debts impact a person's credit history, a centralized financial record that can prevent debtors from getting a loan, renting an apartment, or even getting a job. Furthermore, interest on debts tends to compound over time, especially for accounts that incur late fees, raise interest rates, or experience other consequences of late payment. Like Dabasir, even people who have marred their credit histories are capable of rebuilding. The New York Times recommends focusing on boosting one's FICO score, a number between 300 and 850 that indicates one's creditworthiness to lenders. Recommendations include ordering a copy of one's credit report, paying future bills on time, and focusing on repaying debts that have the highest impact on the score. For example, long-term low-interest arrangements like student loans count less than high-interest rate agreements like credit cards. Important people. Arkad was the richest man in Babylon. Algamish was Arkad's mentor. He was the lender who taught Arkad how to save. Nomasir was Arkad's son. Bansir and Kobi were Arkad's first pupils. Kalabab was an educator whose teachings were based on Arkad's wisdom. Mathan was the gold lender of Babylon. Rodan was a Babylonian who asked Mathan for advice. Dabasir was a camel trader who ran from his debts and was sold into slavery. Eventually, he escaped, repaid his debts, and became an upstanding member of society. Author's perspective. George Samuel CLASON was a self-made man, an entrepreneur who founded North America's first roadmap company before legacy brands like Rand McNally. He parlayed his success as a businessman into the writing of his book, which continued to be a good source of income long after his map business folded. When The Richest Man in Babylon was originally published in the 1920s, the United States was in a post-World War I boom that didn't quite align with CLASON's frugal sensibility. However, the Great Depression began just 3 years after the first pamphlet was printed in 1926. Suddenly, advice that had seemed out of step was perfectly suited to the crisis of the times. CLASON printed the pamphlets together as a single book that he self-published in 1930. The timing was serendipitous, as his map-making company folded just 1 year later. Nearly a century later, much of CLASON's advice remains surprisingly relevant, if quite basic. Some of his views, particularly regarding the equal economic opportunities shared by all men, would be considered conservative by today's standard.